In this video, I would like to explain how to maintain domain integrity using check constraints and default constraints. Okay. The first, let's get the data so that we can practice those check and the default constraints. Okay. Okay. Let's go to the next page for data definition and data insertions. Okay. So I already had a definition and data insertions. Okay, so why don't you make a copy? Okay, and copy it, and then we're going to paste it on your editor window of SQL Server. Okay, so if your database SQL Server is now open, why don't you open it and then paste it there. Okay, once your database open, find your database. Mine is a DB lecture. You have to use your own database. Okay, and then let's have a new query. Okay, already is open, and let's make a copy for data definition and insertions. Okay, so I have a data definition of dbo.emp and all the data entry. Also, we're going to check how the data looks like. Okay, execute. Alright, so we have 101 all the way down to 106. Alright, so just make sure we actually have a table. So go back to your database and tables and click right mouse button and refresh. So here we have a dbo.emp. Alright, so what we want to do is as you can see over here, we have a salary information over here. Okay, and nobody wants to have a negative salary, right? But sometimes people can make a mistake. So when people make a mistake entering the wrong data, we don't want to accept it. So what you want to do is we want to create a constraint over here saying the salary data should be at least 0. Okay, so basically we will not accept a negative salary data. So the salary has to be non-negative value, so 0 to whatever, so any non-negative values. Okay, so what you want to do is we want to create a check constraint. Okay, so let's do that. So go to our emp table. As usual, we can do two ways. One is a GUI way, the graphical user interface. Another one is you can actually type the SQL statement. Well, SQL statement can be quite challenging sometimes. So let's just do it GUI, and then let the GUI graphical user interface produce a SQL statement. Okay. Alright, so go to constraints. Okay, right now there's nothing, so go to constraints and click right mouse button. Can you see that? New constraint. Okay, and then expression. Even before that, let's give a good name. So always give a good name so that we can be more effective in maintaining the constraint later. So how about salary? Okay, or you can have an even different name, like a non-negative salary. Well, I think salary should be okay now. So go to expression. Okay, can you see that little box with a dot dot dot, 3 dots? Okay, click that, and then you can have expression. Over here, actually, you can write just like anything you did after where statement in SQL. So how about salary? We want to take it only if it is a salary is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, and okay. All right, and then we're going to name it as a check employee constraint salary, and close. Okay, and make sure you save it. Can you see that little icon over here, looking like a floppy disk? Save EMP, save it. Okay, So always check, go back to your constraints, right mouse button, new constraint, now I'm in the refresh, okay, and open it, and then you have check EMP salary. If you want to see how it looks like in a SQL statement, just go there, right mouse, click the right mouse button, script constraint as, create to, new query. So if you do it using a SQL statement, this is how you're going to do it. Or you can just use a GUI. Alright, so let's test it and see how it goes. Okay, so right now we have data like this. Okay, so why don't we update data over 101 to a negative 10,000, okay, and see how it goes. Alright, so if you update it, if our update is successful, then 101 will have a negative minus 10,000, which is not cool. Okay, but let's take a look. Or as expected, computer rejecting it now because update statement conflicted with the check constraint. Okay, so you can, by actually creating a constraint like this, you can prevent a lot of undesirable outcomes. Okay, how about let's insert the data with a negative salary, and the database should not accept it, right? So let's take a look. So let's insert the data with a salary of -1. Okay, and nobody likes it, so let's take a look how it works. So when you try to enter data, as you can see here, they don't take it because it would violate a CK EMP salary constraint. Okay, so let's take a look what happened to data, our table. As you can see over here, nothing has been changed. So when you have many tables and constraints, you need to know how to use the data dictionary. Okay, so let's take a look at how to use a data dictionary. Okay, and syntax for that is a exec and sp help constraint and table name. This is actually called the stored procedure. So we'll discuss this stored procedure later. Okay, this is actually a system-defined stored procedure. But anyway, so let's execute it and how it goes. So as you can see over here, so we can see a check constraint. Name is a check EMP salary, and our constraint looking like this: salary is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so perfect. Okay, if you want to delete the constraint, just go to the constraint and click the right mouse button. Can you see that? Delete. Alright, if you want to see the script how it looks like, okay, then it's basically drop constraint and the constraint name. Alright, so just say okay, it's done. So as you can see over here, nothing there, is deleted. Alright, this time let's create a constraint involving a more than one column. Okay, well, before doing that, let me close these editors, which I don't need now. Always a good idea to clean the environment. I don't need it, just too many open. Okay, alright, it's clean. So let's have a new query window, and then what you want to do is basically creating a constraint involving more than one column, but this time 2 columns. Okay, let's look at your table, EMP table, and here we have a hire date and the termination date. And obviously you cannot terminate a person before you hire that person, right? So termination date has to be the same or after the hire date. Okay, otherwise data is not right. Okay, so let's create a constraint so that we don't have that sort of corrupt data. Okay, so go to constraint, click right mouse button, new constraint. Okay, and let's always give a good name. So how about start and termination date? Okay, start, termination date. Okay, alright, can you see expression and a small box with a dot dot dot, 3 dots, and expression would be hire date has to be less than or equal to termination date. Okay, alright, and close it, and don't forget you save it. Can you see that little floppy disk? Okay, save it. Always a good idea to check whether you actually have it. So go back to constraint, refresh it, and take a look. Aha, so here we have a check constraint EMP start termination date. If you want to see how it looks like in SQL, just right mouse button, script constraint as and create a 2 in the new query window. Aha, so basically this is how you do it. Okay, so constraint is a hire date has to be less than or equal to termination date. Alright, so let's check how it works. So let's create a let's try to insert the data. So in this case hire date is before termination date, so this one should be fine. So let's take a look. Aha, so no problem. And always a good idea to check anyway. So as you can see over here, we have 202 with a hire date and a termination date. Let's insert a little problematic data. So for whatever reasons, we're trying to enter data where the termination date is actually before the hire date. Okay, and so this one should be rejected, and see how it goes. As we expected, this one is rejected. So if you look at the data, so 203 is not entered as we expected. Okay. Again, always a good idea to also check the data dictionary. So when you look at the data dictionary, so here we have a check. Also, constraint with the hire date is less than or equal to termination date, and constraint name we give a very descriptive name like start termination date. Okay. All right. And also, if you want to delete it, as we talked about, just go there and then delete, and okay, then it's gone. All right. Okay, now let's talk about the second domain integrity constraint, the setting a default value for columns. All right, so let me show you an example first, and I'll talk about why we are doing what we are doing. So for example, when you enter data like this, 301, okay, and if you didn't do anything other than entering the emp ID, and if you look at the value, there is everything else will be null. Okay, but if you want to have a default value for salary like 0 instead of null, we can actually define a default value for some columns. Okay, so let's take a look at how we're going to do it. So go back to your database and your table, and then columns. Okay, and what we want to do is, even if we don't do anything, we want to have a zero for $0 for the salary. Okay, so go to salary, click the right mouse button, okay, and modify. Okay, and we want to have can you see at the bottom we have a default value? Okay, so we want to have a default value of 0. Okay, so let's save it. Okay, and then make sure that constraint is actually defined. So as you can see over here, we have it. And if you want to see the SQL statement, just right mouse button, create constraint as create to, and then you can see we set the default value for salary. Okay. Alright, so let's take a look at what happens if we enter the different data. So in this case, we want to enter data of MPID 302. Okay, and let's take a look how the data actually looks like. Okay. Well, in case of DBO, you don't have to type DBO as for schema, but anyhow, so let's type that up. So as you can see over here, 302, we have the salary value of 0 rather than null. Okay. How about the different one? So if you want to set the default value for department number, let's say 999, we can do that. Again, go back to your column, right mouse button, modify. Okay, and we want to have a default value of 999. Okay, and then you can save it. You can see that. Alright, so make sure it's actually created there. Refresh it so we can see over there. So if you want to see the SQL statement, click the right mouse button, do the same thing as we just did, and as you can see here, we create a default value for department number, and default value will be 999. Okay, so let's create a let's enter the new value. How about this one? Okay, so we insert a value of 302 named Smith. Okay, so let's execute it. 302 is already there, so how about 303? Alright, so let's take a look. Okay, so as you can see over here, 303 Smith, and the salary is 0, and the department value is now 999 instead of null. Okay, and also if you want to check the data dictionary for your definition, as we did. Okay, excuse me, you can use a data dictionary, basically stored procedure, execute sp help constraint. Okay, so as you can see here, we create a default value for department number for 999 and default value for salary to 0. Okay, alright, so we in this video we talked about how to create domain integrity constraints using check and also default. Hope you understand these two concepts okay now. Alright, So well, everything is done. So if you want to remove the table, all you have to do is drop table. Okay, so it's gone. So if you go back to your database and refresh it, now we don't have that DBO table. So okay,